My brother told me the family meeting was for people who had something real to contribute. I didn't argue. I took my coffee to the porch steps and sat with the late afternoon quiet. 30 minutes later, his phone rang through the screen door. I heard the realtor's voice, excited, saying the cash buyer had finally submitted their name. I heard my brother repeat it out loud like a question. I heard the silence after. I set my mug on the railing and said, loud enough for everyone inside to hear, that would be me. My name is Daniel Reed. This is my story. The drive into Clarksville always does something to me. The moment I cross the county line and the billboard for Pearson's Feed and Seed appears on the left, my shoulders drop about 2 inches. I don't know if that's peace or just old muscle memory pretending to be. I'd made this drive 100 times in the last decade, always in the same truck, a dented gray F-150 with a cracked side mirror I kept meaning to fix. My brother called it the shame mobile once, laughing so nobody would have to decide if he meant it. I never replaced the mirror. I pulled into the driveway behind Mark's BMW and Jess's pearl white SUV. The house looked the same as it always had. White clapboard siding, a porch that sagged slightly on the left side, an oak tree in the yard so old it had its own gravity. My father was standing at the window when I got out. He didn't wave. He watched me the way a man watches weather he isn't sure about yet. Inside, the house smelled like coffee and the faint cedar of my mother's good tablecloth, which meant she'd cleaned for us, which meant she was nervous. She handed me a plate of sliced banana bread before I could set my keys down. Her eyes moved over me quickly, checking for damage, the way she'd done since I was 7 years old and kept climbing things I wasn't supposed to climb. You look thin, she said. I'm fine, Mom. Are you eating real meals? Not just drive-thrus? Real meals, I said. Every day. She didn't look convinced. She never did. Mark was in the dining room with his laptop open and a legal pad beside it. He'd gained a little weight since last Christmas, the kind that comes from long client dinners and airport lounges. He was wearing a collared shirt with the sleeves rolled up, which was his way of signaling he was working even when he wasn't in the office. Jess sat across from him, phone face up on the table. Her husband Greg stood near the bookshelf, hands in his pockets, smiling at nothing in particular. Greg always smiled at nothing in particular. I'd learned early on that it wasn't friendliness. It was calculation running quietly in the background. Mark looked up when I came in, gave me the nod that passed for a greeting between us. Good drive? Fine. You take 24 or the bypass. Bypass is faster. I know. He went back to the laptop. That was the full extent of our reunion. My father came in from the hallway, moving carefully the way he'd started doing after the second cardiac event last spring. He was 63 years old and looked like he was carrying 68. The doctors had adjusted his medication twice. The bills had followed each adjustment, like a second opinion no one asked for. He shook my hand, which was something we did now. Shake hands, because somewhere along the way hugging had become awkward between us and neither of us had thought to fix it. Glad you made it, son, he said. He said it the way you say it to someone you expected to show up and are only mildly surprised that they did. I sat at the corner of the table, my usual position in every room this family had ever occupied together. Mark had a presentation ready. I could see the slides reflected in his glasses before he even turned the screen toward us. He prepared for this the way he prepared for client meetings, which told me the decision had already been made somewhere before today. He walked us through it cleanly. Dad's medical costs running around $4,000 a month now, higher if the specialist visits increased. The house needed a new HVAC unit by winter, and the left section of the back roof had been soft since the storm 2 years ago. Property taxes had gone up 14%. They were carrying all of it on savings that had another 18 months in them, maybe 24 if nothing unexpected happened. And something unexpected always happened. The solution, according to Mark's third slide, was a place called Sycamore Ridge in Chattanooga. Private rooms, on-site physical therapy, a memory care wing, not that either parent needed it yet, but planning ahead was wise. He'd already spoken to the intake coordinator. The cost was $6,200 a month for the both of them. They could cover it by selling the house, which a realtor friend of Greg's had assessed at $800,000, conservative estimate. Greg nodded along to all of it. He had the particular stillness of a man who had heard this pitch before. My mother's hands were folded on the table in front of her, very still, the way hands get when someone is working hard not to let them move. I said nothing. What do you think? Jess asked me, and her tone was the careful one, the one she used when she wanted to seem like she was including me, while also signaling that the answer she was looking for was agreement. I think it's a lot to process, I said. Mark clicked to the next slide. Timelines. We'd like to have a decision before winter, he said. The HVAC can't wait another season. And Greg's contact at the realtor's office says the market is still favorable. Greg's contact, I repeated. He smiled at nothing again. I know the area well, he said. I've done some development projects down that corridor. I picked up my coffee. I kept my voice even. What kind of development? Mixed use, he said. Retail, some residential. A few hospitality partnerships. Mark moved on to the next slide before I could follow that thread. He was good at that, resetting the room's attention with a click. After he finished, he looked at the three of us and said he thought it made sense to have the real financial conversation separately from and then he paused, from the logistics side. He looked at me when he said logistics side. He might as well have pointed. Daniel, he said, I know your situation is different. You don't need to sit through the numbers part. Maybe get some air and we'll loop you in on the plan once we've sorted the structure. My situation, I said. He kept his voice neutral the way people do when they want to be condescending without leaving evidence. You've got the landscaping work. That's great. It's a different kind of contribution than what we're working through here. I looked at my mother. She was looking at the tablecloth. I said, sure, stood up and took my coffee outside. The porch was cooler than the inside, the air carrying the smell of cut grass from somewhere down the block. I sat on the top step and looked at the oak tree. There was a rusted hook still embedded in the lowest branch from a tire swing my father had hung when I was 9. Nobody had taken it down in 20 years. Some things just outlast the reason they were put there. I pulled out my phone and opened my messages. There was one from my operations manager, Kevin, asking if the Maple Street commercial job was still on the books for Thursday. I typed back yes. Then I opened a thread with my attorney, Sarah, and scrolled to her last message from 3 days ago. The offer stands. Reed Land and Build, LLC as buyer of record. Purchase price $2.1 million. Sellers haven't asked for the buyer's identity yet, but they will when we push to close. I stared at the oak tree. I had driven past this house in my truck the way I always did, looking unremarkable. A man in old jeans with a cracked mirror. The kind of person a room quietly arranges itself to exclude. What the room didn't know was that Reed Land and Build had 47 employees, that we'd cleared $8 million in revenue last year, that I had quietly paid for the roof repair on this house 2 Augusts ago through a construction account that didn't have my name on the letterhead, that for the last 3 years, a company called Blue Ridge Administrative Services had been processing my parents' medical bills, cardiac follow-ups, the specialist in Nashville, the physical therapy copays, through an account I funded every quarter. I hadn't told anyone because I didn't want the thank you. I wanted to see who they were when they didn't know to thank me. I went back inside through the kitchen, not the dining room. My mother was at the sink, rinsing cups she'd already rinsed once. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her. Mom, I said, where do you keep the billing stuff? The medical invoices? She turned around faster than I expected. Why? I want to understand what you're actually carrying. We're managing, she said. I looked at the counter beside the refrigerator, where she kept the mail sorted into a wooden organizer I'd made for her in a high school shop class, still held together by the original finish I'd applied at 14. There was a thick envelope tucked behind the bills section, not fully hidden, just not displayed. I crossed the kitchen and picked it up. She didn't stop me. It was a collection notice from a cardiology group in Nashville. 62 days past due. Behind it were 2 more, different providers. Behind those was a statement for the HVAC quote. The number at the bottom was $9,400. She stood at the sink with her back to me. She said, your father doesn't know about all of it. I folded the envelope closed and set it back in the organizer exactly where I'd found it. Then I stood beside her at the counter and said, you don't have to go to Chattanooga. Her shoulders moved. What does that mean? It means I need a day. Give me 1 day before anyone signs anything. She turned and looked at me for a long moment. Not like weather this time. Like a woman trying to remember when she stopped being able to read her youngest son. She nodded once. I went back to the dining room. Mark was still at the table, the laptop closed now, talking to Greg in a low voice that stopped when I came in. I need to ask you something about Sycamore Ridge, I said to Greg. His smile held. Of course. What's your connection to it? He tilted his head slightly. I've done some work in that corridor, like I mentioned. Hospitality partnerships, I said. You mentioned that. Does that include the management group that runs Sycamore Ridge? A pause. Very small. Then, I know some of the investors. It's a quality facility. I looked at Mark. His face had gone careful. So great profits if mom and dad are placed there, I said, and great profits when the house sells through his realtor contact. That's 2 fees from the same transaction. That's a significant oversimplification, Greg said. Probably, I said. I kept my voice flat. I'm just a landscaper. I tend to see things at ground level. Mark closed his legal pad. This is not the conversation we're here to have, Daniel. What conversation are we here to have? He leaned back and crossed his arms. The one about what's sustainable. About what's sustainable. About realistic contributions. About how we take care of mom and dad without everyone playing a role they can't afford. I can afford my role, I said. You run a crew out of a shed on Route 9, he said. I'm not dismissing that. But this is a different scale. I sat down. I put both hands flat on the table. I said, Mark, when did you last actually look at what I do? He frowned. What does that mean? Just answer the question. I know you built something decent, he said. I've always said that. Something decent. I let that sit. Then I took out my phone and pulled up the company website, turned it to face him. The homepage had a photo of our newest project, a 30-acre commercial landscaping installation outside Nashville, green and clean under a September sky. 47 employees listed on the About page, 8 service trucks, 4 states. He stared at the screen. Jess leaned in from his side. I slid the phone across. Look at the portfolio section, I said. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Jess said, quietly, Daniel, when did this happen? It happened slowly and then all at once, I said. Same way everything does. Mark set the phone down. He wasn't defensive. He looked like a man doing arithmetic that isn't coming out right. You never said anything, he said. I know. Why? Because I needed to know what you'd say when you thought I had nothing. That landed hard. I hadn't meant it as a punch. But things that are true tend to hit the way they hit. I went to find my father. He was in the garage, not working on anything, just standing at the workbench the way he did when he needed to be somewhere his hands could look like they had a purpose. The garage smelled like oil and sawdust. The permanent smell of every project he'd ever started in here. A timeline I could read like rings in a tree. Dad, I said, I want to show you something tomorrow. He looked at me over his shoulder. What kind of something? The kind that changes what you think you know, I said. He was quiet for a moment. He picked up a wrench and set it back down. You're not in trouble? I'm not in trouble. He nodded slowly. He looked at his workbench. Then he said, I told your brother to handle this because I thought you couldn't. That was a decision I made without asking you. It was the most direct thing he'd said to me in years. I didn't fill the silence with anything. Tomorrow, I said, and went back inside. Morning came gray and quiet, a thin layer of cloud that the sun would burn through by 10. I was up before anyone, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table where the overhead light was still on against the dim. I texted Kevin to bring 2 of the company trucks by the house around 9, told him we had a job assessment nearby. That was true. I was assessing the house itself. Mark came down first, hair still damp, dressed for a business meeting in a family kitchen. He poured himself a cup and sat across from me. Last night, he started. You don't have to, I said. No, he said. I do. He turned the mug in his hands. I've been running the Atlanta life for 11 years. Nice car, firm, good neighborhood. Dad looks at me like I'm the one who got it right. And I cannot tell you how much I hate family law. I cannot tell you what it costs to sit across from people in the worst moments of their lives and pretend the paperwork matters. He looked up. But you saying you needed to know what we'd say when we thought you had nothing. That hit me, Daniel, because I never asked. I never looked. I thought about the basement at the old house in Macon, the 2 of us doing homework at the same table, him faster than me at everything on paper, me faster at everything that required my hands. We'd split early and drifted the way brothers do, into different versions of adulthood, and then assumed those versions were the whole truth. You can do something else, I said. If you want out, we can figure out what out looks like. He laughed once, low. Just like that. Not just like that, I said. They'll take work. But yes. Jess came down next without Greg, which itself said something. She'd sent him back to Charlotte that morning, an early flight, she said, without explaining what that meant. Her eyes were clear in the way eyes get after you've cried enough that there's nothing left to blur the vision. She sat down and wrapped both hands around a mug and said, "I've been making my life look like a magazine spread for so long, I forgot what I actually wanted it to look like." "What do you want it to look like?" I asked. She thought about it for a real moment, not a polished one. "Less coordinated," she said, "more honest." She looked at her phone and then turned it face down. "I haven't been happy in 3 years and I've been telling everyone I've never been better. That's exhausting, Daniel. That is genuinely exhausting." My parents came down together, my father's hand at my mother's back, the old domestic shorthand of 35 years. We filled the table naturally, the 5 of us, no extra chairs for Greg or his realtor contact. My mother made eggs. Nobody turned on a laptop. When the food was on the table and my father had said the short grace he always said, I pulled a folder from the chair beside me and opened it. "This is Clover Hill," I said. "It's 10 minutes from here. It's been open since April." I slid the brochure across to my mother first. She opened it slowly, the way you open something you're not sure you want to see. The photographs inside were of a low single-story building with a wide porch and raised garden beds along the front walk, a kitchen with a long farmhouse table visible through a window, a reading room with natural light, a small gym with the kind of equipment a cardiac patient actually uses. 22 residents, I said. Staffed by a team that runs Monday through Sunday, live-in nurses 2 nights a week. The garden is real, not decorative. The cook is local. There's a shuttle to the medical complex on Jefferson 3 days a week. It's not Chattanooga. It's here. My mother's hand came up to her mouth. "I funded it," I said. "It's been running for 6 months. I set it up because I couldn't think of a good reason why getting older should mean leaving the town where you know the roads." My father stared at the photo of the porch. His jaw worked. He didn't speak. "There's something else," I said. I took out a second folder. This one held 2 documents. The first was a printout of the property purchase offer, Reed Land and Build LLC listed clearly as buyer, the Maple Street address, which was this house. The second was a receipt from an anonymous construction account dated 2 August ago for roof repair on a residential property. This residential property. I laid them both on the table side by side. "I've been the buyer since March," I said. "I was going to convert the back lot into a community space and let you both stay in the house as long as you wanted. You wouldn't have needed to sell. You never needed to sell." "And the roof," he said. "The man at the church who said he knew someone?" "That was me." He set both hands flat on the table. He breathed out slowly. His eyes were very bright. Outside, I heard the sound I'd been listening for. The particular diesel rumble of a work truck slowing down. Then a second. Kevin was prompt. I'd always appreciated that about him. I stood and crossed to the window. 2 green Reed Land and Build trucks idled at the curb, the white lettering on the doors clean against the morning light. The company name and below it the phone number and the small oak tree logo I designed myself, at a kitchen table and a rented room 7 years ago when the company was 1 truck and a borrowed trailer. Mark came to stand beside me. He looked at the trucks, then at me. "That's yours," he said. There wasn't a question. My father appeared on my other side. He looked at the trucks for a long time. He read the name on the door. He looked at the logo. I could see him arranging something in his head, putting pieces into a shape that the shape he'd been holding didn't match. He said, "I thought you stayed because you ran out of road." He said it quietly, like a confession. "I thought you stayed because Atlanta or Nashville or wherever seemed too big and Clarksville was what was left. I said things to your brother about responsibility that I should have said to you first, or never said at all." He turned and looked at me directly. "I don't do this easily, Daniel." He paused. "I'm sorry. I missed what you were building because I never looked at what you were actually building." It was the second most direct thing he'd said to me in 2 days. In my father's economy, that was a significant withdrawal from a very old account. My mother was at the table again, brochure open, her hand moving over the photograph of the garden beds. She said, without looking up, "We spent years making Mason feel like the future of this family." She used my brother's name and then stopped. She started again. "We spent years looking in the wrong direction." She looked up at me. "All those bills, all those appointments. I thought they were being handled by some program your father applied for." "There was no program," I said. She said, "I thanked a stranger in my prayers every month for 3 years." "Not a stranger," I said. She closed the brochure and held it to her chest. She didn't say anything else for a moment. Then she said, "You were right here." The trucks idled outside. The coffee went cold and nobody noticed. Mark took the documents and read them both fully, which was the lawyer in him, unable to pass a page without processing it completely. Then he set them down and said, "The Greg situation. The referral fee." "I know," I said. Jess was looking at the table. She said, "I didn't know about the facility connection. I want you to know that." "I believe you," I said, and I believed her. Mark said, "The house doesn't need to be sold." "No. What do you want to do with it?" "I want Mom and Dad to stay in it as long as they want to," I said. The lot behind it becomes a community garden and gathering space. That was always the plan. The Clover Hill staff comes here for check-ins. We don't ship them anywhere. My father made a sound that wasn't quite a word. He pressed the back of his hand to his mouth and looked out the window at the truck with the oak tree on the door. "You named the logo after the tree," he said. I nodded. He looked at me for a long moment, and that look was a lot of country, a lot of years, a lot of wrong assumptions held with too much confidence. He didn't try to summarize all of it. He just said, "I see you. Finally and for real, I see you." My mother reached across the table and took my hand with both of hers. The same hands that had pressed banana bread on me since I was a child, that had checked my forehead for fever and written grocery lists and folded the tablecloth we were now sitting around. She held on and didn't let go for a while. Mark sat down. He pulled his legal pad toward him and uncapped his pen. Not to plan, just because he always needed something to hold when he was thinking. He said, "I want to come home." Nobody said anything immediately. The word home sat in the middle of the table among the coffee mugs and the documents and the brochure, taking up more space than its 4 letters should. "There's room," I said. "The company needs someone who understands contracts. And Cartsville needs people who left and chose to come back." He looked at his legal pad. He put the cap back on the pen. He didn't agree out loud right then, but he didn't disagree either, and in my brother's economy, that was significant motion. Jess said she needed time. We all understood what that meant and what it didn't mean. She stayed the full day. She helped my mother in the garden in the afternoon, and I watched them from the porch. 2 women learning to talk again at the level below the level where things are managed. That was its own kind of beginning. In the evening, Kevin drove the trucks back to the yard. I sat on the porch steps where I'd sat the afternoon before, but the quality of the quiet was different. When you've been carrying a weight so long that it shapes how you stand, the absence of it doesn't feel like relief right away. It feels like learning to balance on new ground. My father came out and sat beside me on the steps, not in a chair, on the actual steps, which he hadn't done in years. He looked at the oak tree. The rusted hook caught the last of the light. "I always meant to take that down," he said. "I know," I said. "Never got around to it, no." He was quiet for a bit. Then he said, "You built something, Daniel. You built something that matters, and you built it without any of us watching. I don't know if that makes you strong or if it makes me the reason you had to be." "I think it makes us both human," I said. And I meant it. The sun dropped behind the tree line. The neighborhood went soft and blue and ordinary. The kind of ordinary that you drive past and don't think about until you need it, and then you realize it was there all along, steady as the ground, holding more weight than you ever bothered to measure. I'm not telling this story because the trucks showed up, or because the number was right, or because my father finally said what I'd needed to hear for 30 years. Those things happened and they mattered, but they're not the point. The point is that I spent a decade building in silence because I was afraid that if I spoke, I would only be worth what I could prove. I wanted to be believed before the evidence arrived. I thought if I waited long enough, the truth would speak for itself, and in some ways it did. But silence has a cost and nobody warns you about. It lets the wrong story take root. It lets the people you love fill the space with whatever shape their fear suggests. And then one day you're sitting outside a family meeting you weren't invited to, and the wrong story has been growing for so long it has its own furniture. What I know now is that being seen and being known are 2 different things. The trucks could make them see me, but it took the table, the coffee, the morning light, and the words none of us had said before to begin to make us known to each other. That part doesn't have a logo. It doesn't show up on a portfolio page. It just requires you to stay in the room long enough to tell the truth and be willing to hear it back. If you've carried something quietly for a long time, convinced that speaking up would only invite a comparison you couldn't win, I want you to know this. The story you've been living is not the same as the story they've been telling about you. Those are two separate things, and only one of them is true. Your voice is not an interruption. It is not a liability. It is not something to earn the right to use. It is yours. It has always been yours. Before I go, I want to ask one simple thing. If you're watching this, let me know you're here. Drop a hello in the comments, tell me where you're from. Knowing someone is out there listening changes something. It always has. And if this story reached you, if any part of it felt like something you needed to hear, consider subscribing to this channel. My name is Daniel Reed, and this was my story.